Hey TV fans, Bored now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 Episode 4. The episode is called Among the Lotus Eaters. Full spoilers from the start of this review once again. And really good episode, very strong. It's my second favourite of the four so far, just after the trial one. And similar to that, it does feel like a classic Trek style episode. Probably even more so than that one in many ways. But it feels like classic Trek, but also it puts just enough of a fresh spin on it to give it its own identity as well. So it's a really strong episode, quite a dark episode at times, and Ortega features quite centrally in it, which is good, and they use her really well. And it's kind of key because they split between two halves of the plot where you get like two sets of characters and it follows their progress separately. And for a while I was a bit worried that Ortega's plot was going to be sort of shoved to the side and it wasn't going to be that important. But what they do quite cleverly is they set that up at the start where in the plot it looks like she's getting the shaft a little bit by Pike, but it actually comes back around and she actually saves the day. And in the end, her side of the plot and the characters there, her, Spock and the rest of the crew, they actually make a bigger impact than Pike and his trio of characters. So that was just a clever subversion in a way where they set you up to think it's going to be an Ortega episode. Then for a while it appears as though it's not going to be, but then they pull it back around. I have a couple of complaints about the episode. I guess tiny complaints, because really at the end of the day, like, the main gimmick of the episode worked so well then it didn't really affect anything. First of all, the very soapy romance plot and the drama with Pike and his girlfriend, who was the Federation representative, the lawyer from the from the trial episode, who apparently is getting a lot of heat on like not being able to try the case against Una, and so that's getting her a lot of heat, and Pike says he feels responsible, and it's because of things like that. He kind of feels that maybe them going out is causing her to get shoved back as well, like heat from her superiors. So he's sort of using that as an excuse to like bail on the relationship, which is something Una calls him out on at one point. And seems as though Pike has this history of commitment issues because of that. So that stuff I didn't like, just because it did feel too soapy and over the top and not quite what I'm coming to Trek for. I do like that they bring it back around at the end, because him making the decision to like give the relationship another try, because he's learned a lesson over the course of the episode through the main plot. He's learned a lesson about like getting in touch with his emotions and how important that is, because that's a big thing in the episode about this concept of what would happen if you lost track of your emotions, if you weren't in touch with them. And that's kind of what motivates him to give the relationship another try at the end. So even though I'm not really into the relationship stuff in the episode, it at least pulls it back around to the theme of the episode by the end. My other sort of small nitpick is that I didn't like the villain in this episode. Quote unquote villain. He was never quite a full blown villain, but certainly he was the antagonist. I didn't like his character. I thought the actor was a bit over the top and yeah, just a bit one note as a villain. So he wasn't great, but ultimately because the gimmick of the episode and the themes and the character stuff with the main characters were working so well, it didn't matter too much. So they go down to this planet and we find out that, I've heard that it's a planet which has been used previously in other Trek shows, so that's a nice touch also. And it turns out that it's a planet that was abandoned by like the Federation years ago, and they're there to like get readings. And it starts off with Ortega really excited, and she's in a fancy hat and suit because she feels like she's actually gonna get her hands dirty, like she's actually gonna go into the field. But as it turns out, her team she's just doing the pilot duty again, and that's because you've got this dangerous asteroid field and Pike needs someone to fly for it. So that's where she is, where she gets sort of put on the other side, Spock, Una and all the rest of it. And Pike brings along Khan and also Bannon, Joseph Bannier, and that's a nice callback to the first episode, because he showed in that he's got like he's quite capable of fighting, and because Pike warns there could be like these knights who we come up against in our mission, like to go to the castle, and Khan is obviously also proven as a capable like fighter, so that's why he brings those two. So the setup is, and you have this planet where there seems to be like radiation, and once you get close to the planet or on the planet, like it doesn't take very long for you to like lose your memory. So it's like a memory loss style episode, and we see the effect that starts to have. We see that Khan is the first affected not long after the getting on the planet, and she really starts like sort of tripping out, and ultimately they go to this castle and they're caught by these knights. And it turns out Pike knows like the leader of the knights, who, as I said, Zach his name is, he's the kind of antagonist slash villain of the episode, but he's someone who feels like then he was slated and that he was left behind and deserted by Starfleet previously, so that's why he's kind of doing this, and he's sort of using this thing with people losing their memories as a way to enslave them. So he's running like a slave trade to like keep the planet running, and he's the one like sort of ruling over it. And that's what he does with Pike and his team. He puts them to work as slaves, and at the same time we see the effects this has on Una and Khan, not Khan, sorry, but Ortega and Spock and the rest of them up on the ship, and them like losing their memories and the effect it has. So as I said, there are some dark scenes in the episode, like the scenes with Pike and his crew, you know, his trio, particularly dark, and this is where it really gets into like the memory loss, but also losing your emotions, because ultimately what they decide is then if you lose your memories, then you lose the ability to emote in a way, because like nothing really means anything, but you also lose your skills. And there's this guy who's like he's been a slave for a while, who sort of befriends them, but also is like advising them not to really mess with the regime. And there's a nice little bit at the end of with him when he does get his memory back, where he confesses that the reason he didn't want his memory back, it was because the memories were too painful of what had happened to him and people close to him. So that kind of hints at a darker sort of theme. But the way the characters all react to this and the tension, it's very well done throughout the episode. And I do like how we see different sides of the character, like how aggressive with rage and how uncontrollable Pike is in the scene with like the villain nearly, and with Zach, because when he gets to the castle, because he's told that at this temple is where you can find everyone else's memories again, and because this Zach, because he thinks it's in this box type thing, but it turns out that that's not what is in there. And because Zack is mocking him and won't tell him, that's what sets Pike off. And it's nice to see like a different side to the Pike character, and it's quite a powerful scene. And ultimately, they find out that if you stay in the temple long enough, then you eventually will get your memories. And there's certain other things, like details like the fact that kind of the people running this place, this planet, you see like the main army wear like helmets which protects them from like the radiation and like losing their memories. But so there's some good stuff down there, but even more so on the ship, I think, where Ortega really becomes important. But the episode has clearly defined rules, because there's stuff like Nurse Chapel, how at one point, because they get injured, certain people get injured, including Una, because of what's starting to happen and the ship crashing about and different things. But she points out at one point, then I can treat a head wound or a basic injury like that, but anything else, anything more advanced, I can't really treat, because if I'm losing my memory, I'll forget how to do complex like surgeries or things like that. So that's a really good like idea, and they really go into the rules quite nicely like that. And I also like the detail of Spock writing down people's, well, not exactly writing it down, but he's got like a data, like a list on file of people's like jobs and roles, which he gives to Ortega at one point. And he says, like, if you forget your memory in a few minutes or whatever, then look at this, because this will remind you. So that's a smart way for like Spock to counter that problem. And we see the way it affects Ortega, which is like pretty freaky, because the episode follows her a lot, and she doesn't know where she is at one point, doesn't know people around her, and it goes into detail, because when the ship is shaking about in the asteroid field, and like she's in her quarters, and she doesn't know, because she's lost her memory, she doesn't know what the asteroids are, and she just doesn't know what's happening to the ship or who she is. And so it does go into that in quite a lot of detail of how much it would freak someone out if you lost your memory. And I think in a job sense, like your ability to do your job, especially in that sort of job, it would freak you out like even more. And I like the way they use technology in the episode, and the way she uses like the voice on the ship and in her quarters, and uses that to her advantage to finally realise who she is, like, and that becomes an empowering moment where she finds out that she's the pilot, and she keeps repeating her name, and she uses it as a statement, like, I forget the first name, but like repeats her name, I am the pilot, and she gets more and more defiant with it each time, and she's walking down the hall. But once again, it's not just good because it's a great character moment and it's great for her, but it's also good because it makes sense that she's doing that, because one reason she's doing that, I think, is to remind herself of it, because again, if she loses her memory at any time, which she could do, then I think that's partly why she's reminding herself, because that way she's less likely to forget, and you get really a kick-ass character moment with her taking control and flying the ship, and ultimately, because they come through the asteroids and away from the field, then ultimately they all get their memories back as well. So there's some good stuff down on the planet, but in some ways I think I like the stuff on the ship even more. And once again, it's a good character like driven episode, a bit like last week's I thought was a good character driven episode for Khan. This is definitely one for Ortega, and like, needless to say, her biggest episode. Yeah, and I think they nail it, and I think they nail it as this is a classic Star Trek feeling episode, but they went a little bit further, and also they just put their own spin on it as well. So really good episode, really strong episode, and yeah, I liked it a lot, and it is getting a lot of positive buzz, this one, so I think most people do seem to have liked this one. So that's Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode 4. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/borednow for as little as $1 a month. But keep watching TV, and I'll be back soon. See you later, guys.